No, stay back! What are you wearing?
The 18.7 Hz signal, when the sky started listening. Full horror film, part 1. It started with a frequency nobody could hear, but everyone could feel it. Day 1, the static at exactly 2:17 a.m. The sky over Cedar Falls flickered, not lightning, not aurora, not satellites. It was a pulse, invisible. The power didn't go out. Phones didn't die. Internet didn't crash. Nothing dramatic happened. Except dogs began howling, all of them, simultaneously, across the entire town. People woke up irritated. Some blamed the weather, some blamed fireworks, some blamed each other. But nobody blamed the sky. Not yet. 3 days later, a college dropout named Evan Malik noticed something strange in his late-night radio scans. Evan ran a pirate frequency channel from his garage, mostly conspiracy talk, abandoned signals, weird shortwave stuff. At 3:33 a.m., while scanning, his equipment froze. Then the waveform appeared, a perfect, consistent frequency, 18.7 Hz, too low for humans to hear, but strong, unnaturally strong. It wasn't coming from a local tower. It wasn't bouncing from satellites. It was everywhere, like the air itself was vibrating. Evan recorded it and boosted it through special processing software to make it audible. What came out wasn't static, it was whispering. Not clear words, but patterns, rhythmic, repeating, almost like breathing. The symptoms by day 7, people started reporting strange things. Sleep paralysis, nightmares involving tall, faceless figures, sudden nosebleeds. A deep feeling of being watched, children began drawing the same shape in schools. A spiral inside a triangle. No one knew why. Psychologists blamed mass hysteria. Doctors blamed stress. But Evan knew better. He isolated the frequency again. This time, he layered it under white noise and listened through headphones. That's when he heard it clearly. Open. Just one word. Whispered. Not through the speaker, but behind him. He turned around. Nobody was there. The animals' livestock began dying. Birds flew in circles midair until they dropped. Cats stared at empty corners and hissed. And every night at 2:17 a.m., the sky flickered again, subtle, like a glitch, as if reality had bad reception. The first disappearance, on day 12, a police officer named Daniel Reyes vanished. His body cam footage was recovered. At 2:16 a.m., he was responding to a call about lights in the sky. At 2:17 a.m., the footage distorted. There was no sound, just vibration. The image shook violently. Then something appeared behind him, tall, impossibly thin, head tilted at a wrong angle. And then the screen went white. Daniel was never found. The government notice. By day 15, the government issued a statement. Unusual atmospheric interference is being monitored. No cause for public concern. But that same night, military helicopters circled Cedar Falls. Unmarked vans parked near radio towers, and Evan's house was broken into. His hard drives were gone, except one, the one hidden inside the wall, the original recording. The first disappearance, on day 12, a police officer named Daniel Reyes vanished. His body cam footage was recovered. At 2:16 a.m., he was responding to a call about lights in the sky. At 2:17 a.m., the footage distorted. There was no sound, just vibration. The image shook violently. Then something appeared behind him, tall, impossibly thin, head tilted at a wrong angle. And then the screen went white. Daniel was never found. The government notice. By day 15, the government issued a statement. Unusual atmospheric interference is being monitored. No cause for public concern. But that same night, military helicopters circled Cedar Falls. Unmarked vans parked near radio towers, and Evan's house was broken into. His hard drives were gone, except one, the one hidden inside the wall, the original recording. Evan analyzed the waveform deeper. The 18.7 Hz wasn't random. It was modulated, encoded. like data transmission, but not from Earth. The frequency was synchronized with Earth's natural resonance, but slightly off, like something trying to match us, trying to tune in. And then he found the pattern. The pulses intensified every night at 2:17 a.m., exactly when the sky flickered, exactly when people had nightmares, exactly when Officer Reyes disappeared. The signal wasn't broadcasting to us. It was synchronizing with us, adjusting, learning. Day 18. The town changes. People stopped going outside after dark. Churches filled, stores emptied. Then something worse happened. Some people stopped being afraid. They became calm. Too calm. They stood outside at night, staring at the sky during the flicker, smiling. One woman walked into traffic without reacting. A teenage boy carved the spiral symbol into his arm and said, "It's almost open." When asked what was open, he replied, "The sky." Evan's experiment. Evan decided to do something insane. If the signal was controlling behavior, what if he disrupted it? He built a makeshift frequency jammer. At 2:16 a.m., he turned it on. White noise flooded the area. The waveform scrambled. For the first time in 18 days, the sky didn't flicker. Evan smiled. He thought he'd won. Then every light in the house exploded. His radio screamed. The 18.7 hertz spiked to 22 hertz, then dropped to 17, then back to 18.7, stronger than before. And this time, he heard full words, not whispers, a chorus. "We see you." The sky opens day, 21:17 a.m. The entire town woke up screaming, because this time, everyone heard it, not through ears, through their skulls, a vibration, deep, like the earth was humming a wrong note. The clouds twisted into a spiral. The sky didn't flicker. It tore, just slightly, like a curtain pulled an inch aside. Behind it, darkness, not night, something deeper, and within it, shapes moving, watching, waiting. Evan stood outside, bleeding from his nose, staring upward. His jammer was destroyed, his recordings corrupted, his town half mad. The people who stood smiling began walking toward the hill outside Cedar Falls, hundreds of them, in silence, toward the highest point in town, toward the sky. Evan whispered to himself, "It's not a broadcast, it's a doorbell." And something just rang it, to be continued. The 18.7 signal, Part 2. The Hill of Open Eyes. At exactly 2:17 a.m., Cedar Falls stopped being asleep. It started listening. The hum returned, deeper this time. Not loud, not violent, just present, like pressure inside the skull. Evan was awake before it began. He hadn't slept in 3 nights. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the spiral, turning, slowly, waiting. Then the sound came. 18.7 hertz. He couldn't hear it, but he felt it in his ribs, in his teeth, in the soft tissue behind his eyes, and outside. Doors began opening. The walkers. At first it was only a few. A man across the street stepping onto his lawn barefoot, then a woman in hospital scrubs, then 2 teenagers. Within minutes, dozens of people emerged from their homes. No one spoke. No one looked at each other. They simply walked toward Blackridge Hill, the highest point in Cedar Falls. Evan grabbed his camera. This time he used a backup battery. He had learned his lesson. He followed from a distance, heart pounding, trying to stay quiet. The air felt thick, like humidity without heat, static. His arm hair stood on end. The symbols. Halfway up the hill, he saw it. Every single person had something on their forehead, a spiral, drawn differently on each face, some in dirt, some scratched into skin, some smeared in what looked like dried blood, but identical in shape, precise, mathematically clean. No one told them to draw it. They just knew. The frequency changes. Evan's ears popped, not painfully, but like altitude shift. He checked the frequency reader on his handheld device. 18.7 hertz, but now layered. 17.2, 19.4, 22.1. Multiple low tones interlocking, like chords forming a structure. The hum wasn't random anymore. It was building something. Above them, the clouds were wrong. They weren't drifting. They were rotating, slowly spiraling above the tower, like water circling a drain. The entire crowd stopped at once. No signal, no command, just simultaneous, absolute stillness. Hundreds of bodies, frozen mid-step, mid-gesture, mid-breath. Evan nearly ran right into the back of the last person, a woman in a red coat, her arm outstretched, as if pointing at something that was no longer there. His heart hammered against his ribs, his own breathing suddenly loud and shallow in the profound silence. He looked up, following the collective gaze of the frozen statues around him. It wasn't a visual change, not at first. It was a feeling. The sky seemed to stretch, to deepen. It was as if the familiar blue expanse was just a thin membrane, and something impossibly massive was pressing against it from the other side, distorting the very fabric of space. The depth of the sky had increased tenfold, a terrifying, bottomless void opening up above them. Then, a line appeared, a hairline fracture, thin, vertical, and blacker than the starless night it was slicing through. It didn't look like a shadow or a cloud. It looked like a tear, a rip in reality. The air itself seemed to split open, just a sliver at first, a seam in the sky that pulsed with an energy that made the hairs on Evan's arms stand on end. He didn't know what he was witnessing, but a primal fear, cold and sharp, pierced through his confusion. This wasn't natural. This wasn't anything he had a name for. And then the humming began. The townspeople, the frozen crowd, all knelt, in perfect unison, as if a single thought had commanded them all. Their heads tilted upward, their mouths fell open, and a low, resonant hum filled the air. It wasn't a human sound. There was no warmth in it, no emotion. It was mechanical, precise, a perfectly synchronized chord that vibrated not just in his ears, but in his bones, in his teeth. The sound layered itself with unseen frequencies in the air, creating a complex alien harmony. Evan realized with a wave of nausea that they weren't being controlled, not like puppets. They were syncing. They were matching a frequency, tuning themselves to whatever was on the other side of that tear. They were becoming compatible. The hum intensified, and the seam in the sky widened. It wasn't a violent tear, but a slow, deliberate opening. Inside the widening blackness, there was movement. Not the chaotic movement of an explosion, but something controlled, something purposeful. A shape, then another began to emerge from the void. The descent started. 5 shapes lowered from the opening. They weren't falling, and they weren't flying. They were being lowered, as if suspended from invisible strings by an unseen puppeteer. They were tall, impossibly, unnaturally tall. Their limbs were elongated, stretching far beyond human proportions, their joints bending at angles that were subtly, disturbingly wrong. As they descended, their long, slender forms seemed to drink the light from the street lamps below. Evan's mind screamed for him to run, to hide, to do anything but stand there, but his feet were rooted to the spot. He was a lone, terrified observer in a ritual he couldn't comprehend. The figures drew closer. They wore no clothes, their bodies a smooth, pale, almost ceramic white. And they had no faces, no mouths, no noses, just smooth, unbroken surfaces where a face should be. Except for their eyes. Where eyes should have been, there were small black spirals, rotating slowly, endlessly inward. And they were watching. Evan felt their gaze on him, a gaze that wasn't just seeing him, but analyzing him, dissecting him on a level he couldn't imagine. The humming from the kneeling crowd reached a crescendo as the feet of the first being touched the ground. And then, instantly, it stopped. The silence that followed was more terrifying than the sound had been. It was a dead, absolute vacuum. The air felt thin, sucked clean of all noise. Even the chirping of crickets, the rustle of leaves, everything had gone quiet. The world held its breath. The 5 figures stood motionless in the center of the square, their spiraling eyes turning slowly, scanning the kneeling populace. And then, all at once, they turned towards the only one left standing. Towards Evan. The pale, featureless head of the closest one tilted, a gesture of curiosity that felt like a death sentence. It took a step. The sound of its foot on the cobblestone was a soft, wet scrape, a sound that didn't belong to this world. Evan's paralysis finally broke. A single choked gasp escaped his lips, and it was the loudest sound in the universe. He turned and ran. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to get away from the silent, kneeling crowd, away from the impossible tear in the sky, away from the tall, faceless things with their spiraling, all-seeing eyes. He could feel their gaze on his back, a cold, clinical pressure. He didn't dare look back. He just ran, his footsteps echoing in the terrifying, unnatural silence of a town that was no longer his own. The world had changed in an instant, and he was the only one who seemed to know it. But for how long? Thank you for watching. If this story sent a chill down your spine, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the edge of reality. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a descent into the unknown. Stay safe out there and see you next time. The hill was silent. It held its breath, waiting. For as long as anyone could remember, the hill had been the heart of our town, the place where everything important happened. And tonight, the most important thing of all was taking place. The selection. We all gathered at its base, a sea of anxious faces lit by the glow of torches. Every family was there, every child, every elder. We didn't know what the selection was for, not really. The stories were old, whispered from one generation to the next. They spoke of a choice, a sacrifice, a renewal. But the details were lost to time, like words eroded by the wind. My younger sister, Ilara, squeezed my hand, her knuckles white. She was just 10, and her eyes were wide with a mix of fear and excitement. I tried to give her a reassuring smile, but my own heart was hammering against my ribs. Above us, on the flattened summit of the hill, the elders stood in a circle around the ancient moss-covered stone. They were the keepers of the tradition, their faces grim and unreadable in the flickering light. The air grew heavy, thick with unspoken questions. What were they choosing? Who were they choosing? The wind picked up, carrying the scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic and sharp. A low hum started to emanate from the stone, a sound that vibrated deep in your bones. It grew louder, more insistent, until it was all you could hear, all you could feel. Then a beam of soft, white light shot up from the stone, piercing the night sky like a fallen star in reverse. The crowd gasped. The selection had begun. We watched, mesmerized, as the light pulsed, seeming to scan the crowd below. It moved slowly, deliberately, as if searching for something or someone. My grip on Alara's hand tightened. The beam swept over us, and for a fleeting second, I felt a strange warmth, a pull, as if it was calling to me. But it passed on, moving through the crowd. Minutes felt like hours. The hum from the stone was a constant pressure in my ears. And then, the light stopped. It settled on a small figure near the front, a young boy, no older than Alara. It was Thomas, the baker's son. A collective sigh of relief and sorrow went through the crowd. Relief that it wasn't one of ours, and sorrow for the baker and his wife, whose cries were already starting to cut through the night. Thomas looked terrified, frozen in the column of light. 2 of the elders descended the hill, their faces impassive. They took Thomas by the arm and led him up towards the glowing stone. The light intensified, becoming almost blinding, and the hum reached a deafening crescendo. Then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. The light vanished. The hum stopped. The hill was plunged back into darkness, lit only by our torches. And Thomas was gone. The aftermath on the hill was always the same, a hollow, ringing silence. The baker's wife was inconsolable, her husband holding her as they both stared at the empty space where their son had stood. No one knew what to say. We were taught not to question the selection. It was for the good of the town, for the harvest, for our survival. That's what the elders told us. But standing there in the cold night air, seeing the raw grief on a mother's face, the words felt empty. I looked at Ilara, whose face was streaked with tears. She wasn't just sad, she was angry. "It's not right," she whispered, her voice fierce. "Why did they take him? Where did he go?" I had no answers. I just pulled her close and led our family away from the hill, back towards the dim lights of our homes. That night, sleep was a stranger. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the beam of light. I saw Thomas's terrified face. Ilara's question echoed in my mind. Why? For the first time, I allowed myself to truly ask it. Why did we accept this? Why did we sacrifice our children to a tradition we didn't even understand? The fear that had kept us silent for generations began to feel less like a shield and more like a cage. We were so afraid of breaking the tradition, so afraid of what might happen if we stopped, that we never stopped to consider if the tradition itself was wrong. I thought about the elders, their stern faces and their absolute authority. They were the only ones who went to the top of the hill. They were the only ones who truly knew what happened during the selection. And we just trusted them. But trust, I realized, shouldn't be blind. The next morning, the sun rose, but it brought no warmth. A pall hung over the town. People moved like ghosts, their faces drawn and gray. The baker's shop was closed, a stark reminder of the night's events. The whole town felt sick with a grief it wasn't allowed to properly express. We were supposed to move on, to accept the sacrifice and be grateful. But this time, something was different. You could feel it in the air. The whispers were no longer about the harvest or the weather. They were about Thomas. They were about the selection. Ilara's question, why, was now on everyone's lips, even if it was unspoken. I found myself walking towards the hill, drawn by an impulse I couldn't explain. I had never been to the top. It was forbidden to all but the elders. But the rules that had seemed so solid yesterday now felt brittle, ready to crack. I needed to see. I needed to understand. As I started the climb, I saw others doing the same. A few at first, then more. The blacksmith, the weaver, old Mrs. Gable from the end of the lane. We didn't speak to each other, but a silent understanding passed between us. We were all breaking the biggest rule of all, and we were doing it together. The climb was steep, and the path was overgrown. When we reached the summit, we stopped, breathless. The great stone was there, just as we had seen it from below. It was ancient and gray, covered in symbols none of us could read. But there was nothing else. No sign of Thomas, no sign of any great power. It was just a rock. But then, the blacksmith, a man of few words, pointed to the back of the stone. A section of the rock looked different, darker. He pushed against it, and with a groan of grinding stone, a panel slid open, revealing a dark, narrow passage leading down into the hill. A wave of fear and determination washed over our small group. This was it. The change was happening, right here, right now. We lit a few torches, and with me in the lead, we descended into the earth. The air was cold and musty. The passage was tight, clearly man-made, and it sloped steeply downwards. After what felt like an eternity, it opened into a large, cavernous chamber, and what we saw there shattered our world. The chamber was filled with strange, humming machines, their surfaces covered in blinking lights. In the center of the room, on a raised platform, stood a clear cylinder. And inside the cylinder, floating in a pale blue liquid, was Thomas. He was alive, his eyes closed as if he were sleeping. He wasn't the only one. The chamber was lined with these cylinders, and in each one was a child. We recognized them all. These were the chosen ones from years past, decades past. They hadn't been sacrificed. They had been preserved. Suddenly, the elders appeared from a side passage, their faces a mask of fury and panic. "You shouldn't be here," the head elder shouted. "You will ruin everything." "Ruin what?" I yelled back, my voice echoing in the vast chamber. "Lying to us, stealing our children." The elder's face crumpled. "You don't understand," he said, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "The world outside our valley, it ended long ago. A great sickness. We brought the first children here to save them, to preserve the future of our people. The selection, the light, it's all technology we no longer fully understand. We just follow the instructions left by the first elders, hoping to keep everyone safe." We looked at the children, floating peacefully. We looked at the elders, old men clinging to a half-understood legacy. We looked at each other, the people of the town who had finally dared to ask why. The world we knew was a lie, but it was a lie born from a desperate hope for survival. There was no monster on the hill, no angry god to appease. There was just fear and secrets. But now, the secrets were out. We didn't know what we would do next, how we would wake the children, or what kind of world we would be building for them. But for the first time in generations, we were going to make that choice together. The silence of the hill was finally broken, not by a hum of ancient machinery, but by the sound of our own voices, deciding our own future. The change had come, not from the sky, but from within us. Day 24. A day that started like any other in Cedar Falls, but ended with a crack in the foundation of our reality. It was exactly 2:17 in the afternoon when Officer Reyes walked back into the police station. He was supposed to be dead, vanished without a trace, just like the others. But here he was, alive, clean, and unnervingly calm. He told everyone he'd just gone for a long hike, gotten lost in the woods. A simple explanation for a terrifying disappearance. But simple explanations were a luxury we could no longer afford. The security footage told a different story. The station chief, a man I'd known my whole life, called me in a panic. He showed me the clip. For a fraction of a second, just 0.4 seconds to be precise, Officer Reyes's body flickered. It was like a buffering video, a glitch in the matrix. And for one single terrifying frame, standing right behind him, almost as if it were inside him, was one of those tall, slender figures. The same ones from the rift. It wasn't just watching him, it was watching through him. Reyes was back, but he wasn't alone. That night, something even stranger happened. Phase 1, they called it. Every single television in Cedar Falls, every screen, flickered on by itself. There was no signal, just a blizzard of static. Then came the sound. A low, bone-jarring hum, starting at 18.7 hertz. A frequency you feel more than you hear, rising slowly into an audible, distorted shriek. And on every screen, 2 simple words appeared in stark block letters: Phase 1 complete. As if on cue, the sky above the town began to pulse. It wasn't the violent tearing we'd seen before. This was different. It was rhythmic, slow. It was breathing, in and out, like a colossal pair of lungs adjusting to a new atmosphere. Our atmosphere. The air itself felt heavy, charged with an alien energy. Phase 1 was complete. But what was Phase 1? What were they preparing for? Back in the frantic safety of my garage, I obsessively replayed the audio I'd recorded during the Rift event. I had to find the answer. I slowed it down, frame by frame, isolating every harmonic, every layer of sound, and then I found it. Hidden deep beneath the overwhelming hum, there was a pattern, a progression. Each burst of energy was slightly higher in frequency than the last. It was climbing, tuning itself upward, step by step, approaching some unknown threshold. And then, the horrifying realization hit me like a physical blow. The 5 people who were taken, Officer Reyes included, they weren't sacrifices, they weren't victims, they were receivers, upgraded minds, repurposed as anchors for this signal. These tall figures, these silent invaders, they weren't trying to conquer us with force. They were installing something. They were preparing Earth's very atmosphere, calibrating it, changing its composition for compatibility. The sky wasn't being torn open in a violent invasion. It was being rewritten, edited like a line of code. They weren't just coming here. They were turning our home into theirs. The clock on my computer read 2:17 a.m., the exact time Reyes had reappeared just 12 hours later. And then I heard it. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on my garage door. The rhythm was perfect, precise. The space between each knock was exactly the same, an 18.7 hertz interval between the taps, the same frequency that started the broadcast. My blood ran cold. I didn't move a muscle. I just sat there, frozen, listening to the suffocating silence that followed. The knock stopped. For a moment, there was nothing. Then a whisper, right behind me, inside the room. "We are almost ready." I forced myself to turn, slowly, every joint screaming in protest. Officer Reyes was standing in the far corner of the garage. A faint, knowing smile played on his lips. But his eyes were no longer human. They were spiraling gently, twin galaxies of cold, alien light. And behind him, the solid concrete wall of my garage began to ripple. It moved with a soft organic quality, like living skin. And from the other side, something massive, something impossibly vast, began to press through. The wall bulged, straining, as a shape beyond comprehension began to emerge into our world.